I'm gonna get into work at 8:30 before anybody else. I'm gonna leave after everybody else. I'm gonna go home. I'm gonna read. That's work. That's not life. And I was like, you know what? I need just a little bit of life because I've seen these films. I've made a few. I know if I can ingest more of the world, I can reflect more of it. I think stereotypes come from without, not from within. So, to me, these characters aren't any type. You know, they're actual people that Tarell and I either knew or were. I think the fact that we're seeing this work right now means we probably were in that moment a few years ago. And I had almost this barrier where I thought, oh, can a straight man tell this story? So I was terrified when I initially read it. But it was about taking ownership of the piece. I wasn't sure if I could fully do that. But our lives are so damn similar. I mean, down to the T. And I thought, if I can't empathize with this character, then I'm saying something fundamentally fucked up about sexuality and what it means for humanity versus inhumanity. So for a year, I buried myself. And I buried myself because I had a question in my head that I didn't want anyone to ask me before I answered it for myself. And that question was, is this guy not good enough for this program because he's black and he's poor, he grew up with a mom addicted to drugs? Or does he just not know you need light to expose film? And I'm going to read as much film criticism as I possibly can. I'm going to open the field of my experience as wide as possible, and then I'm going to come back. And when I come back, I'm going to show him. You know, it's funny. I was terrified of making this film initially. You know, if you read anything about this movie, you will read that Barry Jenkins is straight and Tarell McCraney is gay. And I had almost this barrier where I thought, oh, can a straight man tell this story? Because I believe there are certain narratives that they can be told without a first-person perspective or a first-person experience, but to maximize the potential, the possibility of the feeling, you need a first-person perspective, and I didn't have that for certain elements of this film. So I was terrified when I initially read it, but it was about taking ownership of the piece. I wasn't sure if I could fully do that, but our lives are so damn similar. I mean, down to the T. And I thought, if I can't empathize with this character, then I'm saying something fundamentally fucked up about sexuality and what it means for humanity versus inhumanity. And I was like, I just can't abide by that. So I'm going to take ownership of this piece, fall in love with this character, and place myself within his being. And so I did that, and we got on with it. Florida State's a very good film program. They pay for everything. We shot everything on film. It's a great training ground. And then I got to LA, and nobody gives a shit about anything you want to do. And for those 2 years, I kind of like fell out of love with filmmaking because I thought, I don't want to be nobody's assistant. I want to blah, 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 blah.
And what age range was that?
I was 25, which is the worst thing, a 25-year-old in LA who's, one, a director's assistant on a movie produced by Oprah Winfrey, starring Halle Berry, within 3 months of graduating, and then is working in Harpo Films, reading books, reading screenplays. I thought, that ain't good enough. But then this really cool thing happened. So you're right, I'm telling my bio now. So I had gotten this grant for $5,000 when I graduated from Florida State. It was how I was able to afford to move out here. And it was this thing called the Pathfinder Award. And then when I realized that I wasn't working out at Harpo, they had a 401k. This is like 2007, 2006. And the 401k, Ms. Winfrey has great benefits at her company. She is very good to her employees. My dumb ass, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna cash out my 401k. So I took like the 55, 60% tax hit you have to pay when you cash out a 401k early, but it was so robust that I had like $7,000 just in the year and a half I worked for her. And I was like, now I'm gonna do what I wanted to do when I graduated, which is, I'm gonna do what the white people do. I'm gonna go to Europe and go backpacking. I wanna see the world. However, I learned very quickly that $7,000 would not go very far backpacking in Europe. So I took trains around the US for a whole year. I gave my car, the car Darnell gave to me, I paid it for it. I gave it to some church, like a church charity. And I just took trains for a year. I go to San Francisco for 2 months. I go to New York, DC, Chicago, went back to Florida.
And what was the intention? What was the drive behind
I just
trains?
felt like I lived my whole life in this very small world in Miami. I hadn't seen anything of the world falling in love with cinema and film school, I realized, wow, it's a very big world, bigger than my 8 blocks. And I was like, I want to see some of that. But I came to LA, and everybody here works in the industry. If you're doing it the proper way, it is furious. You have to be like, I'm going to get into work at 8:30 before anybody else. I'm going to leave after everybody else. I'm going to go home. I'm going to read. That's work. That's not life. And I was like, you know what? I need just a little bit of life, because I've seen these films. I've made a few. I know if I can ingest more of the world, I can reflect more of it. And so I thought, well, I can't go to Europe, but I'm just going to touch every piece of the U.S. I can. And it was very lonely, but it was very, very...
At certain points in your life over the course of your career, but I want to say in your life and your career, you have to be real with yourself. One semester into film school, I think I changed my own life by just being real with myself. I was a terrible, terrible film student. Terrible because I didn't have the tools to know how to utilize my voice in the realm of filmmaking. So I went to the dean. I said, Dean, I love being here. I really wanted to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me into this program. I need to leave. I went to the dean and said to him, I do not want to continue in film school right now. I said to him, I don't want to continue right now because I do not have the skills that my classmates have. Will you please give me a year to leave this program, bring myself up to speed, and I will come back, and I promise you I will not waste this slot. And he said yes. Dean Frank Patterson said yes. And so I literally took a year off film school. I had started a creative writing degree, and I thought, oh, I'll just go and somehow I'll become this 6-year undergrad student by finishing my creative writing degree while doing what I described an independent study. Some of you have probably heard this story before. I took a still photography class. I went to Blockbuster Video and went to the foreign film section, and I watched every single foreign film that was on the shelf. There was a science library on campus called the Dirac Science Library. It changed my life, because in the top floors you had all these things about chemicals and cells and biology, and in the basement, for Lord knows what reason, you had this treasure trove of art books. You had Masters of Light, you had Thoughts of a Cinematographer, just all these things. So for a year, I buried myself, and I buried myself because I had a question in my head that I didn't want anyone to ask me before I answered it for myself. And that question was, is this guy not good enough for this program because he's black and he's poor, he grew up with a mom addicted to drugs? Or does he just not know you need light to expose film? And so I took that year off, and I said, you know what? I'm going to learn how to expose film better than anybody else in this program, and I'm going to read and listen to as many DVD commentaries as possible. I'm going to find the most obscure film journal that's written in English, which was Sight and Sound, because I couldn't translate Kahoot to cinema for myself. And I'm going to read as much film criticism as I possibly can. I'm going to open the field of my experience as wide as possible, and then I'm going to come back. And when I come back, I'm going to show them. I'm going to show every damn body.
I think stereotypes come from without, not from within. So, to me, these characters aren't any type. They're actual people that Tarell and I either knew or were. I think we have characters in this movie that you don't see very often, represented in arts and letters. And I think the way the actors give those characters a fully fleshed out and lived in voice is the reason why people are identifying so much with the characters in our story. And that to me is fully a testament to the quality of the acting. And if the people in this movie don't go on to do more work, then I would say that's an indictment of the system, because clearly the talent is there.
I want people to be able to explore their passions and fulfill their dreams, Now, it depends on what dreams you have, If you have a dream of winning Best Picture, I can't tell you to pursue that dream. That's not something to be pursued, If you have a story you very, very viscerally want to tell, I want you to have whatever resources you need to realize that dream, And I think over the course of the next 10 years, I also hope too that we create enough spaces for everyone, especially for people who have not been allowed the space, who've been denied the space to tell those dreams, to do so. Perfect example. I'm going to implicate myself here. I was scheduled to give this keynote from 11 to noon. There's a filmmaker named Nigel Moonlight who has a film called Jen that somehow is also screening at 11:30 this morning. There's also, The Wrap has, no, it's screening right now. but it's also screening tomorrow. And then the Wrap also has a Women in Power breakfast that's happening right now. And so, inadvertently, I, a person who both a man and someone who won Best Picture, I'm taking up space from a young female director who's having her world premiere right now, and this group of women that are discussing things that are very important to the industry. So I hope that over the course of the next 10 years, there's enough space for all those things to happen, and that the space I take up doesn't deny anyone access to the same space. That's my dream.
But I was wondering if you could talk a bit more about the colors in the movie and sort of like the story you were trying to tell through the colors. I was so blown away by like every single scene and like how I felt like there was a specific thing happening with the colors.
And you're already doing it in Medicine for Melancholy also.
Yeah, a little bit. We try not to be too overt with the color blocking in the films. Celine Sciamma did a beautiful job with it in the film Girlhood, with the color blue. And I saw that film, and unfortunately, I was like, well, shit, we can't do that. Because our movie's called "And Moonlight, Black Boys Look Blue." So we tried to be a bit more subtle with it. I think in the third chapter, the color blue takes on a bit more resonance than it does in the early parts. But again, the movie's meant to be an immersive experience for the audience. So the times we're most aggressive with the color blocking are times when it's in the consciousness of Chiron. So in the second story, when he has the dream about Kevin, and in the third story, when he has the dream about Kevin, that's when we're doing very aggressive things with the color. For me, the most visually thematic thing we did with color was all about the Paula character. In the first story, there's this light at the end of this hallway. And again, working intuitively, I remember getting to set, because Naomi's work we had to do in 3 days. And if anybody sees the film tonight, I'm going to retell some of these stories. I apologize. We had to do all her work in 3 days, and so we only had her in each location one time. And when you work that way, you have to utilize the location as much as possible. And I remember getting to this apartment and looking down the hallway and realizing that this hallway symbolized this distance that cannot be traversed by these two characters. And I knew we wouldn't production-wise go in the bedroom because we couldn't afford to production design it, but I wanted the bedroom to have a presence as this place that Chiron cannot go, this place of darkness for his mom. And we tried to, I don't know if there's a Freudian or Keynesian thing, something with like color temperature and how it relates to psychology. And we kind of looked it up a little bit. And then we went in the room and we just started dialing up this color, like literally manually dialing it up, the color temperature. And we ended up with that sort of like pink, and that's right, we're in Holland. We ended up with that pink red light, symbolizing this thing for Chiron's mom and what goes on back there. And so it wasn't about trying to chart a path across the film, but there were certain places where the spirit of Chiron moved us. And so we did a little thing. Yeah. It was amazing, and so I moved to San Francisco for that woman. And of course, it was great, it was awesome, and then it was not so awesome, and then I was dumped. So I started writing, and I wrote a few screenplays, and then I wrote this one, Medicine for Melancholy. I got the script together and sent it off to the contacts I had made in Hollywood. It was a really small, low-budget film, so I assumed somebody's gonna open this package and just be like, you know, here's the money, go make your film. That did not happen. As a filmmaker, I was absolutely like just on the bottom. I thought so little of myself and didn't think I was capable of doing so many things. I called my friends, and part of that call was just to complain around, man, can you believe nobody called me back and blah, blah, blah. And then it was Justin who said, you know, whoa, what are you doing? This, you don't need that, you know, it's totally fine, you know, we're still gonna make the movie. And it was just then, you know, applying the ingenuity we learned in film school and going, okay, we can't do it that way, you know, but let's see how we can do it this way. Everybody who worked on the film was a person I went to film school with. This movie would not have happened without those friends. Once we started, it was like this huge ball that was just going to absolutely keep rolling downhill no matter what. And so it was an absolutely amazing experience. And we sold out every show. It's a film made by 5 people in San Francisco with no stars in it. I always remember one of the very last things that a professor said to us in film school was, he said, look to your left and look to your right. The most talented people you will ever work with are sitting in this classroom with you right now. and the people who will only ever tell you yes, who will never tell you no, are sitting in this classroom with you right now. Please remember that.
And I love how in Moonlight the music and the images really worked really well together. And can you tell me a little bit about the reason behind the choice of music you made? Because I listened to the playlist on Spotify from Moonlight without the images, and it still tells a story itself. So.
Yeah, that's the last comment is key. You know, I knew the kind of music I wanted in the film, and some of the music is written into the screenplay. Like the Barbara Lewis song that plays in the diner is written into the screenplay. The lyrics are literally written into the screenplay. But then the score is this whole other thing. I knew the tone of score I wanted. I knew the instrumentation I wanted, that it was going to be sort of a chamber orchestra. But we didn't try to start composing music before we had the film. The composer, Nicholas Patel, Academy Award nominee, Nicholas Patel, he was very cool about, he lives in New York, I live in LA, and after we had a pretty good cut of the film, when the film was like 90% what it was going to be, I started going out there, and your last comment is key, because rather than him writing music and us trying it in the film, we would sit together and we would watch the movie. And then we would play certain demos, instrumentation for the film. And what happened was we did it in sequence. And so as the character evolves, the score evolved as well. To the point that if you've read anything about the music in this film, or if you've seen the movie, near the end of the film, the character's becoming more masculine, and we have this hip-hop in the States. It's a good test audience. If I say chopped and screwed, does anybody know what that is? Can you raise a hand? So chopped and screwed is a style of hip-hop in the States, primarily in Texas, but also in Florida, where they slow hip-hop down and they alter the pitch. It gets very bassy and, quote-unquote, very masculine. But in this masculinity, the lyrics are slower, so now you can actually hear what people are saying. There's a lot of pain and yearning in hip-hop, but the BPMs are so fast that we often don't catch it. So in Chopped and Screwed, all these screw artists think they're making the music sound a lot tougher, but what they're actually making it sound is way more sensitive and vulnerable. And so in the film, the hip-hop, the source cues are getting more masculine as the film goes on. And Nick, because we're watching the film, we're telling the story with the music, he started chopping and screwing the violins as well. And so it's this beautiful thing where I do agree, if you take the film and take the images away and just listen to the score, Nick is also telling a story, to the point that our end credits suite, that cue, there's this song that plays on the beach during the most sexually overt scene in the film. It plays again in the kitchen, and then there's this song that plays when Kevin is making the chef special. The end credits suite is a journey back through the film, chopping and screwing those three cues, and then coming out of chopping and screwing to the character's birth with his violin and cello, and piano. So great observation, and I think the reason why it feels that way is because rather than imposing music on the film, Nick and I would watch the movie and let the characters tell us what was appropriate in the score. With both Janelle and Naomi, I think both those roles are difficult in different ways, with Janelle, she'd never acted before, and yet she related to the character like immensely on a very visceral level. With Naomi, it was a challenge, I wanted someone who had very good chops, as they say, and Naomi has very good chops, but she's nothing like that character, and so it was about research and trust and just kind of going for it. And she came to Miami, man, and she just went for it. And she's playing the character that, to me, is most personally related to my biography. She's playing basically a composite of my mom and Tarell's mom. And so it was really difficult working with her on the film because, at that point, it's like I'm reliving my life, in the present tense, with this fantastic actor, but I need to separate that because we have a character and we've got to build. And every step of the way, when I asked Naomi to do something, I'd explain why and she would explain how she felt and we would just go for it.